book of Esther. The book of Esther. It's in the Old Testament, just before you get to Job, or Song of Solomon. It's right out there. Esther comes just before Job. Turn to the first chapter of Esther. I'm not going to read it all, I just want to start there, okay? About 3 weeks ago, not quite that long, but on about September the 12th, God drew me to the book of Esther in my prayer and study. And as I began to read the book, I began to see a parallel and a correlation between what is happening in America and what is happening in ancient times in the empire of Persia. And so today I'm going to preach to you a message entitled The Ageless War of Good versus Evil. The Ageless War of Good versus Evil. The death of Charlie Kirk on September the 10th, 2025 shocked the world. Millions around the world were deeply affected and grieved by the assassination of this young man in Orem, Utah. Since his death, multitudes have struggled to understand why this young man's life was cut short at the age of 31. Was his death an act of terrorism? Was this an attempt to silence the voice of freedom? Was this an attempt to stop a movement of young people who were being asked to consider the real meaning of what is being indoctrinated into their minds in universities and across America? Was his death part of the sovereign providence of God? I believe that we could answer yes to all these questions. But even as we do, we don't fully understand why. How could Charlie Kirk's death possibly result in good? Many have stated from the past few years that he was destined for high things in this nation. Some have even gone so far as to say that he would one day be president of the United States. The influence of this 31-year-old far outreached than any other person of his generation. His name was known in governments around the world and on the street, not only in the United States but elsewhere. Kirk was no stranger to the White House, and he was clearly recognized by face and name in the halls of Congress. Just a few months before his death, he wrote a detailed letter to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, affirming his deep love for the nation of Israel and the Jewish people, while urging the Prime Minister to radically reform how it communicates with the younger generation of this digital age. Charlie began his letter by saying, "Everything written here is from a place of deep love for Israel and the Jewish people. I think it's important to be brutally honest with those you love. In my opinion, Israel is losing the information war and needs a communications intervention." He went on to outline a detailed communication strategy to the Prime Minister that would help him to influence a younger generation around the world to who Israel was and what it represents. Netanyahu later made this statement about that letter: Charlie Kirk spoke hard truths out of love. However, on September the 10th, whatever his future might have been was suddenly and completely cut off because his life was taken by an assassin's bullet. I've shared this with you for two reasons. Number one, some have asked me if Charlie Kirk was a martyr. My answer to this question is yes. He gave his life for his faith and his belief without backing down. This is the definition of a martyr, one who will die for his belief and the message he proclaims. A martyr can either stand for good or evil. The death of Charlie Kirk is nothing new to the world, wherein there rages this war between good and evil. From the beginning of time, there has raged this battle. Even before the Garden of Eden, evil was present in the universe as Satan mounted a rebellion against God for the rule and right over the entire universe. This war became good between good and evil has continued throughout the history and will continue until the end of time. Even until the end of the 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth will this conflict rage, until the very end of that hour when God shall judge once and for all the evil of history, and will once for all eliminate it forever in the ages to come. So here's my message, and this is what I propose to tell you. My purpose for this message is to speak to you about the fact that you and I are caught in the middle of this struggle between good and evil. We must know, therefore, how the enemy of our soul works constantly to destroy our presence and influence in this world. Secondly, we must know what we must do to be victorious over the devices and schemes of the devil. And thirdly, we must recognize that God is behind the scenes at all times, working all things out according to the counsel of his own will. So my text today I will take from Esther chapter 4, verse number 12. And they told Mordecai what Esther had said. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go and gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, which is the capital city, and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." And Mordecai then went away and did everything that Esther had ordered him. Father God, I ask you to anoint these next few minutes to the hearts of those who hear, and that you, God, will speak through my life what you want to say. For it's in your holy and precious name we ask. Amen. I first want to look at what we must know, that evil is ever present to destroy everything that is good. Evil is ever present to destroy everything that is good. Bill O'Reilly has recently written a book I encourage you to buy, Confronting Evil. This is his 19th New York Times bestseller. He's a prolific writer and very, very detailed in his research. He mentions in that evil is not just hurting someone or accidentally doing something bad, but it is a planned event to hurt and malign and destroy another person and enjoy the doing it. That's evil. Satan does not have you in his heart except for the fact to bring havoc and destruction to your life, to your family, to your children, to your health, to your well-being, to everything you stand for. Satan is against you. So know this, when you leave this church, you are in a war for your survival. Satan wants to destroy you. And he will do anything he possibly can get by with that God will allow to get it done. And so we must always be on our guard. We must constantly be ready to defend the faith that we stand for and to know what we believe in. It's so important that you know what you believe. I am amazed at the illiteracy of Christians that know no scriptures. They can't find John 3:16. They don't read their Bibles. They don't pray much. They don't study. They don't research. It's as though everything you get on Sunday morning for 45 minutes right here. And if you're living that way physically, you're going to starve to death. And you're starving spiritually if that's your case. So forgive me for being bold and honest, but I got to be. The time is short. We don't have any time to waste. We have a generation of young people that don't know anything about the Bible. And forgive me. I'm being honest. Because they think they can get everything they need on Wednesday night from Paul Wayne in 30 or 40 minutes of teaching and preaching, and then don't crack a book again until next week when they come to church or don't bring one. Kids, I'm going to tell you something. If you don't get your act together as a teenager, you're going to fall to the devil when you get grown. Because you're not going to suddenly mature into this godly, mature believer because you got out of high school and have a diploma in your hand and you can go into the big old world out there and make a killing. No, you're not. You're going to physically, you're going to spiritually suffer martyrdom because you don't know enough to defend your faith, and it will be stolen from you. Hear me today. The church in America has ceased to preach the gospel by and large. We don't talk about sin anymore because it's too harsh to people. It's too confrontive. We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. We don't make them feel bad. I got to tell you something. People need to feel bad because of sin, because sin's going to send you straight to hell. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. You go straight to jail. And if we're not ready to meet God, that's where we're going. And Americans think because I live in America and go to church at Easter, I'm Christian. No, you're not. The only way you're a born-again believer is if you have the evidence of God's Spirit in your life and you are imitating Jesus Christ every day. That's how we know you're a Christian. By your works you shall know them. By your faith. Your spirit must bear witness with God. And so you cannot possibly be a Christian and walk in sin at the same time. It's impossible. That's not possible. John tells us this in 1 John. He said, those of you who have God in your life, you cannot live in sin because sin and God don't mix. And we're trying to mix God and the world, and it doesn't work. And we're finding that out in a nation today that is so broken spiritually, it doesn't even know where to turn. And I pray to God Almighty that somehow through this death of this young 31-year-old trooper for Jesus Christ, this young soldier of the cross, he didn't go into places stirring up stuff. He asked for people to just come and talk to him that disagreed with him. Most people don't want to talk to anybody that disagrees. We run in our own circle because we don't want to confront anybody. Charlie wasn't afraid to confront people, and he didn't get mad doing it. He always smiled at them. And he told them what he believed. He didn't tell them they had to believe like he did, but he said, you need to go think about that. That's all he did was challenge them to debate and to discuss, to converse. We're afraid to talk to a lost person because we don't want them to not be our friend. What are they going to tell you when they stand before the God of heaven at Judgment Day and say, you were a Christian and you didn't even tell me I needed to be saved? Now, they might not accept your salvation offer. They might not accept your Jesus. But at least they won't be able to point their bony finger in your face and say, you should have told me. You should have told me. God forbid that we should let people go to hell without even trying to stop them. I told my kids and grandkids years ago, I said, you're going to have to crawl over my prayers to get to hell because I'm going to pray every day against sin in your life, and I'm going to hold you accountable to that, and I'm going to trust that God will do something powerful in your life because I believe Jesus is coming, and only the righteous are going to be saved. You got to know that the enemy is against you. The characteristics of evil are so plain. They hate everything that's good. Paul tells us this in the book of Romans, chapter 1. Look at it. Romans chapter 1. You don't have it in your notes up there, Janie. I didn't give it to you. They are filled, this is verse 29, they are filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice, which is intent to harm. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God. And the list goes on. That's what evil is. They. Who's they? People who don't know Jesus. You're capable of doing the unthinkable if you don't know Jesus Christ. There are people in prison on death row today that never intended to kill that guy in cold-blooded murder, but their life went that way because of poor decisions and a rejection of God or a lack of knowing, and they ended up on death row in some penitentiary or life sentence. So we need to understand that evil doesn't stop with just a little bit of sin, a little bit of badness. It gets worse, 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 and evil will eventually destroy itself. Evil, another characteristic is it's cunning and subversive. Oh my goodness. Satan never comes at you with a red cloak and a big forked spear and some kind of horns on his head. He comes to you in sheep's clothing. He comes to you like a school teacher, like an administrator who's I'm in this for the good of you. It's all your good. I'm thinking about it. Come on, give me a break. We got teachers today that are indoctrinating our kids to go straight to hell, to reject the gospel, to reject their parents, to not listen to mom and dad, to refuse to be disciplined, think your own way. No, they're not wanting you to think your own way. They want you to think their way because they've been broken, and broken people only preach a broken message. Cunning and crafty are they. They're diabolical, and they use their resources to manipulate and influence society. Let me give you an example. This is right out of Esther. This is what Haman did. Haman is this guy who was an Amalekite descendant. You know who the Amalekites were? They were the people that prayed and attacked Israel when it was trying to come out of Egypt, and they'd been on this long march, and the weak were on the backside of the group, stragglers, and they were attacking the stragglers, just like lions prey upon weak zebras. They kill the weak first because they're easy. And the Amalekites were doing that. And so Moses said, we're not going to put up with that. So he told Joshua, you take out the guys and you go into the battle, and I'm going to the mountain and I'm going to pray, God give us victory. So Moses went up on the mountain, Aaron on one side, a guy by the name of Hur, weird name, right? You heard of Ben-Hur? Well, it wasn't a Hur, H-E-R, it's H-U-R. One on each side, and they're lifting up Moses' hands when he's tired. So God came in, and Joshua defeated the Amalekites and made this statement, God did to Moses afterward: destroy the very remembrance of them. That was God's message. Destroy the very remembrance of the Amalekites. Why? Because they were bent on evil. They were bent on evil. There's a long story behind the nations of this world and history, and I don't have time to go into it, but God was not unjust to demand the destruction of this evil group of people. But they didn't kill them all. Some of them got away. Well, years later, after Israel becomes a nation, Saul is the first king, and guess he's got to face? A guy by the name of Agag. He's the king of who? The Amalekites. They've got an army now. They come out against him. God told Saul to go out and destroy all of them. Don't leave anybody alive. What did he do? He kept the king alive and some others. And for that, God stripped the nation of Israel from Saul and gave it to David. Because of that sin. And now years and years later, hundreds of years later, after the captivity, after the Babylonians, after the destruction of Jerusalem and all that, after coming back to Israel, many of them came back and rebuilt the city. We still got people in Jewry living in the Persian Empire, 126 states in this nation. And this guy by the name of Haman comes to prominence. And he uses all the deceptive trickery that sin does to destroy other people. Here he is the descendant of Agag. He is an Amalekite. And the Amalekites' one purpose is to destroy the Jewish nation. Evil has been around a long time, and we're still dealing with it today, aren't we? So Haman comes to this prominent place in the government of Ahasuerus, the king of the Persians, and he puts him up above all the other people. And Haman goes to Ahasuerus with this deal. He said, look, he comes to know because Mordecai doesn't honor him because he's a big stud. Mordecai has his reasons. I'll get to that later. But Haman goes to Ahasuerus and he says, he uses deceptive tools here. He said, look, king, there are a group of people in this nation of ours in all the provinces that are against you. They're plotting against you. Well, it's not true. It was a lie. You see, sin and hate and evil always lie. You know when the devil's lying. You know when he opens his mouth. There are people living in this world today in high office. They don't even know how to tell the truth because the truth is so far from them. They don't know what the truth is. Whatever they say is truth to them, but it's a lie. So Haman's a liar, And he tells him that there's this rebellion mounting up in the nation. God, he said, sir, if you'll give me power, if you'll give me an edict to go and I will eradicate this group. He didn't even tell him who they were. He didn't even know how many there were. And sure enough, Haman, what does he do? Because he's infiltrated the inner circle, Ahasuerus says, okay, I'm going to give you an executive order. And it's, you know what executive orders are, right? The president writes out the executive order, he stamps it and signs it, and in that day they used what they call a signet ring. He gave his signet ring to Haman. It's like kind of what President Biden did to whoever signed his executive orders, that we know he didn't sign, not all of them. So somebody's writing executive orders in the name of Ahasuerus, and it's Haman. And his edict is that on a certain day we're going to kill all the Jews of the nation of Persia. So there goes the description of evil, the characteristics. So what its objective? I've told you this, but I'll tell you again, the annihilation of all that is good. They want to destroy everything that's good in you, in your family, in our nation, in this world. John 10:10 tells us this: the thief comes only to steal. The word steal is to secretly or craftily embezzle something that doesn't belong to them. Anybody here ever had the devil steal something from you? Absolutely. He comes to kill. What does it mean? To slaughter. You say, well, what does that happen? Well, I think, if the best of my recall, we've slaughtered about 60 million Americans in the last 51 years. You say, how? I said, through abortion. We slaughter our own offspring and grandchildren. We slaughter our own future. And that's exactly what Satan wants to do. He wants to destroy your future. He wants to destroy your posterity. He wants to destroy your hope. He comes to slaughter that and to destroy. That's the kicker. What does the word destroy mean? To totally annihilate. As if it never existed. That's what destruction is. The power to dominate is also an objective. And man, we see this everywhere. Haman used this. He used money. He used money to get to Ahasuerus. How do you do that? He said, King, if you will give me the permission to do this, I will give you 10,000 talents of silver. Well, Ahasuerus' ears perked up. Why? Because Persia was already fighting a battle with Greece that would finally destroy them, and they were not making headway with them. They were losing. And he had poured tons of money into that war. And the nation of Persia was in financial difficulty. And Haman happened to be a modern-day billionaire plus. Okay? This guy's loaded. I don't know where he got his wealth, but he got it from somewhere. And he said, I'll give you 10,000 talents. He said, well, how much is that? Estimates are that 10,000 talents was approximately 2/3 of their gross national product in that day, annually. That's going to bolster the economy. That's going to help with the coffers. So well was that he gave him a signet ring. So, hey, you do whatever you want to do. You bought me off. That's really what happened. He bought him. And that's what we're doing in now, nations. In our Congress, they're being bought. Everybody's on the payroll to somebody besides your government. Are you listening to me? Everybody. I don't want to say everybody. Let's say the vast majority. No, somebody's payroll. Why? Because we got lobbyists that contribute to their campaign funds, and they're always campaigning, especially representatives. They're campaigning from the time they get elected till the next 2 years, which is a tragedy because they never have time to do anything good except raise money. Well, the more money you raise and the quicker you raise, the better you have a chance to win. Do you know that? You realize that, don't you? People win elections because of money. Money buys elections. So that's what happened. That's the characteristics of evil. It wants to control other people. Circumstances or the cost. Never. Never. Say never. Never. How often is that? Never. God cannot compromise with evil. Good cannot compromise with evil by giving in to its demands. Esther chapter 3 verse 1 says, after these things King Ahasuerus promoted Haman. I've already told you about this. The Agagite, and he advanced him and set set his throne above all the other officials who were with him, and all the king's servants who were there at the king's gate bowed down to Haman and paid homage to him, for the king had commanded so. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Why? Because Mordecai was not going to compromise what he knew was right, no matter what. He would not compromise to evil. Many young people today, and I'm going to speak to the youth, many of you guys, I hope this stirs you up. I really hope it does, because I see an army of young men and women rising in America. And guess what? I wouldn't say the vast majority, but you know how a great number of those kids are Catholic kids. Catholic kids. Evangelical boys and girls. I wonder how many Pentecostals there are out there standing up for what's right. It really doesn't matter how much we shout and holler hallelujah, speak in tongues in church, if we can't stand up for what we believe is right in a schoolroom or in our job. So you kids, here's how it works, and this is what the devil does. This is how he manipulates you. So you're being manipulated by your own mind, and you're allowing it to happen. Well, listen, the class, we're supposed to write an essay on government, whatever, and you choose to write a conservative paper. And you present that conservative paper to this teacher in your junior or in your freshman, sophomore class, and they give you a D. The only thing they gave you credit for was turning it in. And because of the content, they will not give you a C, A, or B. You get a D. And you're after grades because you want to get a scholarship to go to school, because it's high to go to college. How many of you know that? And we're talking about $1,000 an hour in some places. Unreal. So you make up your mind, well, look, if I stand up for what I believe in, I'm going to fail this class. So the next time you have an essay to write, you write what they want you to write. So you've been manipulated to comply with their wishes, and you're doing something you don't even believe in. You're writing about something and encouraging something you don't agree with. Listen, don't ever agree with something you don't agree with. Never confess that you have sinned if you haven't. And never give in to something that's demanded no matter what, because if you compromise as a teenager, you will compromise as an adult. And it goes on through high school, and you've compromised. So, well, I'm just going to get out of school, then I can do what I want. Well, you're now applying to college, you're going to med school. Well, now then, the medical schools are very liberal. You know that. We're turning out doctors that believe in transgenderism. Good night. I mean, how crazy is that? So you go to this med school and you got to comply again in order to graduate or get a grade, because you want to apply for residency somewhere when you get out of school. And so you have to play the game. And so you play the game. And now you've gone through 8 years of schooling, and you finally got that degree in your hand, and you're putting into a job somewhere, and you've got to play their game. Are you with me? You say, Brother Ron, if I don't play the game, I'll go hungry. I beg your pardon. David said, I was young and now I am old, but I have never seen the righteous forsaken nor his seed begging bread. How many of you believe Charlie Kirk was successful? Let me see your hand if you honestly believe that. Whether you agree with him or not. You think he was successful? You know what? He wasn't a college graduate. He didn't go to college. He went 1 year and he said, I can't do this. He started Turning Point USA as a 19-year-old kid. 19 years old. He had no money. He had nothing. But he had a message of truth that somebody picked up on, and people will pick up on this. And here's the deal. Let me tell you guys this. You as a conservative young person, you are the majority. You know why I know that? Because the majority of conservatives voted Donald Trump into the presidency this year. That tells me there's more conservatives in America than there are liberals. Don't be afraid to stand up, because if you stand up, there's somebody else will do it. If you'll take a stand, they'll take. Here's the deal. There's power in numbers. And I encourage you guys now to make a stand. Take a stand. It's going to hurt. You're going to have to stand up, and you're going to be rejected by some of your friends and some of your people. by coaches, doesn't matter. What matters is if the real guy that really approves of you is in control of your life. I got to quickly go on. You can't compromise. Mom and Dad, don't compromise. Here's the deal. If you want your kids to, if you want them to stand up, you got to do it. You got to stand up for what's right. Don't tell them not to drink if you've got Bud Light in your refrigerator. Don't tell them not to be on drugs if you've got pain pills you can't live without and you've been off your problem for 4 years. I'm being honest. America's addicted to pain medicine. And the pharmacists are getting rich, and the pharma companies are getting rich off of you because they've got you hooked. And I know it's not popular to say, but it's the absolute truth. If you want your kids to take a stand and do what's right, you got to do it as mom and dad, as a parent, as a grandparent. I have grandparents say, well, I don't want to, they're my grandkids. I'm not going to cross them. Bless God, you better cross them. If you don't, you'll be sorry someday. I just asked for people to stand up for Jesus, and I was preparing this. This message came to me. This old song came to my heart. Stand up for Jesus, you soldiers of the cross. Lift high his royal banner. It must not suffer loss. From victory unto victory, his army shall lead. He shall lead till every foe is vanquished and Christ the Lord is king. Hallelujah. There's 3 more verses I won't read, but that's the whole idea. Stand up for Jesus. I truly believe that Charlie Kirk stood up for Jesus, and I witnessed the unbelievable effect his death had on this nation. I saw more than 75,000 people at State Farm Stadium in Tempe, Arizona the other day. I couldn't believe it. I thought, good night, this looks like a revival of Billy Graham, greater than anything I've ever seen. They had worship service. They gave altar calls several times. People got saved. People were blessed by God. There were people with their hands raised up from all over the country. There was a stadium across the street, had 25,000 in it. There were thousands outside. It's estimated about 200,000 people were there. I don't know if that's true or not, but probably more than 100 million people saw that funeral service on that Sunday. I watched the whole thing. After we got home from church, I viewed it till 5 o'clock. We had to get here, and I left President Trump still speaking. I didn't see the very end. But I will tell you this. I witnessed that day, and I think this was rightly said. This is not a funeral. This is a revival. It was a revival. Charlie Kirk did more through his death than he ever could have accomplished in his life. Jesus did more in his death than he could have ever accomplished if he had lived 100 years. Because his death spread like fire. The death of the martyrs is the seed of the church. We must not be silent. So what we must do is we must not be silent when confronted by evil. And so Mordecai learned all this that was done in chapter 4, and he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and went out into the midst of the street and cried out with a loud and bitter cry. And he went up, in verse 2, to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth but Mordecai. In every province, it said, verse 3, wherever the king's command and his decrees reached, there was a great mourning among the Jews. Now they're all upset. They're all broken, with fasting and weeping and lamenting, and many of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. So there was something that was done when Haman's edict of destruction was issued. In our day, the church got on its face before God and began to seek the Lord. We didn't care if they went to our church or another church. It didn't matter if they totally agreed with my doctrine. What matters is we're all blood-bought children of the living God. And if we don't stand together, nobody's going to do it for us. Nobody. Oh, my goodness. They didn't just stand up for what was right. They told others what's going on. Look at chapter 4, verse 6. Hathach, which was the guy that was over Esther's harem, basically, he was her caregiver, went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened, because Esther was oblivious. She didn't know about this edict. And so Mordecai, verse 8, also gave him a copy of the letter issued from Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther, and explained it to her, and he commanded her to go to the king to beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. So not only did Mordecai agree, but he shared his message with other people, and people began to rally. So she did. And then she sent back this. You see, I realize that God places you where you are for a purpose. So I'm going to tell you this. Wherever God's placed you, you better make an impact. Don't just sit there and work your 40 hours and go home. Let your light so shine that men will see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Don't be ashamed of your Creator, because He wasn't ashamed of you to lay down His life in front of the world. I know this is tough. I know it's tough. But we're in a battle against good and evil. You're on the good side, I pray. And we got a war against this evil that's trying to take us over. So there is Esther placed in her position of royalty, and I believe there are certain risks involved in standing for good and truth, don't you? There's always a risk when you do what is right. Chapter 4, verse 11 says, all the king's servants and the people of king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king, this is Esther speaking, inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law: he will be put to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter, which is the golden rod with a ball on top of it, so that he may live. For as for me, I have not been called for over 30 days. So she says, look, I don't have an invitation to go in him. If I go in, he could have me killed before sundown. And that happened before. But Mordecai said, wait a minute, I want you to listen to this. There are no exemptions. There are no exceptions just because he hasn't asked you to come in or invited you in. Because if this thing goes through, you're not going to live much longer anyway. You ain't got a whole lot to lose but a few months. Are you listening? We're so thankful, God give me life. How long are you going to live? 20 years, 30 years, 40, 70, 100? That's only a flash in the pan compared to eternity. Charlie lived 31 years. Some of them lived less. Jim Elliott, great missionary to South America, he and 7 other missionaries were killed by the Auca Indians 60 years ago. And he wrote in his journal before his death, he said, he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. That's still a statement made almost every week by some preacher around this world. It's true. You're no fool to give what you cannot keep to gain what you cannot lose. And I pray to God that gets through to all of us. And Esther got the message. She heard what cousin Mordecai said. That was her cousin, not her uncle. A cousin raised a cousin because her parents died. So she comes back to him and says, and after they told Mordecai, verse 12, what Esther had said, then Mordecai told them to reply, do you think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than any other Jews? For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise from the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Who knows that you have not been born into the world for such a time as this? This is our time to stand up for Jesus. I got to close. We must finally realize that God is sovereignly working behind the scenes to bring everything into conformity with His eternal will. God is not sitting on the sidelines seeing how the game's going to end. He knows how the game's going to end. He knows what casualties are going to be inflicted. He knows the number of martyrs that are going to be under the altar waiting for the resurrection. He knows. He knows what it's going to cost you on your job or in your school to take a stand for God. He knows. But he also knows this, that the victory that we have in Jesus Christ is greater than anything we could ever have in this world in 10 lifetimes, because God has eternal victory for those of us who serve him and walk with him. Romans 8:26, you've heard this 1,000 times, but let me read it one more time for your sake. Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know how to pray as we ought, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. And he who searches the heart knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints in accordance with God's will. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good to those who are called according to his purpose. It's interesting to know that Haman came up with this idea in the book, and I'm going to call it, he came up with this in the month of January. That was their first month. It was Nisan, but I'll call it January so you can understand. And he got permission in January to kill all the Jews. Well, they went and they were going to figure out what was the best day to do this. We got to have a day. So he went to the enchanters and the astrologers and the witches and all that, and they started inquiring and casting lots for which day of the year. And so they came to January the 10th, and that's not the good one. And the lot didn't show up that. And look at this. Look at the odds. They go from January all the way to the 13th of December, and they still don't have a good report. They don't have a good dice throw. They haven't come up with double sixes yet. And finally, on the 13th day of December, they roll the dice and blow me out. This is the day. All the enchanters rolled the same thing. They all had sixes. They said, that's it. That's it. What did that say to you? God allowed this thing to be issued, but he also gave time for them to prepare for it. He put it off for 12 months, 11 months actually. And so Esther and Mordecai went to work, and all this stuff in the middle of this is happening now as she goes before the king, and she invites Haman to a banquet with King Ahasuerus, and they have a banquet. And she says, can you come back tomorrow and I'll tell you what I want? And she comes back tomorrow and she tells him that Haman is going to have her killed. And the king looks at him and he says, what do you mean? This is my queen. And Haman had built a gallows 75 feet high. That's pretty tall. 75-foot gallows. That's a high hanging tree in those days. And he's going to have Mordecai hung on it because Mordecai wouldn't now bow down to him. And now then, the king that night before couldn't sleep. And he gets up and he thought, just bring me some of the records of history. I want to read a little bit of history. So they brought him a book that had 4 years old. And he goes back and he flips to the very page where a guy by the name of Mordecai came into him and told him about an assassination attempt that would be tried to carry out by two of his people. And he had him put to death. And he asked his attendant, he said, what's been done for this man that did this? They said, nothing. And the king was shocked. He thought, I forgot about that. So he looked at Haman, he said, the next day when he came in, and he said, what do you think should be done for the man who honors the king and is high in the king's estimate and all this stuff? And Haman goes down through this long list of things, and he says, oh, king, listen to me. Here's what I think you should do. What should be done for the man whom the king delights to honor? And Haman said to him, whom should the king delight to honor more than me? That's what he's thinking in his mind, okay? And Haman said to the king, for the man whom the king delights, let royal robes be brought, which the king has worn. Let the horse that the king has ridden, and on whose head the royal crown is set, and lead him through the street. And he said, okay, Haman, go get Mordecai. Whoa, what a shock. And about that time, Esther said, oh, by the way, King, this is why I brought you here. He wanted to have Mordecai killed, and he wants to have me murdered too. And the king said, the gallows that he was building for you, hang him on it. And they did. Here's the deal. Evil will have its day, but it will come to ruin. But good will always triumph. I ask you to stand. The plans of God will never be thwarted. Job said this after his trial. He said, I know that you can do all things and that no purpose of yours can be changed. Nebuchadnezzar recognized that after 7 years of wandering around in the outdoors as an idiot. He came to himself and he made this statement. He says, the Most High be praised forever and ever. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his own will, according to the hosts of heaven, and according among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand or say to him, what have you done? Nobody can question God, because his decisions are final. Now I ask you this, and I'll forgive me for the hour of lateness. How many in this room would say to me today, Brother Ron, I want God to give me the courage and the strength and the boldness to take a stand for Jesus wherever I am. I just want to be able to stand up for Jesus. I don't want to cower. I don't want to be a hidden closet Christian. I'm not talking about going crazy and waving a Bible in somebody's face. Say, you got to repent or you're going to hell. I'm talking about just standing up for what's right, standing up for what you know is real. I know Jesus. He changed my life. You're not attacking anybody by that. He's just simply stating what's happened. That's just the truth. So right now, as we close this service, I'm going to ask you to do something. I'm not putting you on pressure, and if you're not ready, don't do it. But for those of you who said, Brother Ron, I want to take a stand for Jesus, and I'm going to start right now. I'm going to ask you to step out from where you are and come and stand here at the front. This is a good time to start. Today's the best date I know to start. If you can do it here, you can do it somewhere else. I want to take a stand for Jesus. Y'all come on up to the front, please. We've got a lot of people coming behind you. I will tell you in coming, it won't always be easy. It won't always be simple. It's going to be complicated, actually. But I got to tell you something else. When you lay down at night, after it's over, you can roll over on your side of your pillow and say, God, I've done that. Man, I'm glad I took a stand for the Lord. I'm glad. Thank you, Jesus. In this time we live, we've got to take a stand for Jesus. I applaud all of you, and I too want to do that because we have all been silent too long. Too long. Right now, I want you to do your own prayer.